That evening in New York, a late autumn chill blew in from the Hudson, strange and sharp. I was sitting in the VIP room of a five-star restaurant, a glittering banquet spread before me, but my heart felt as cold and heavy as if someone had just placed a stone inside it. A butter-poached lobster had just been set in the center of the table when my husband, Julian Croft, raised a glass of carrot orange juice and handed it to me. He was wearing a tailored gray suit, his hair perfectly combed. Julian looked at me, his voice as warm as honey. "This toast is for my wife. Without you, I wouldn't be where I am today. You are the most important woman in my life." The whole table erupted in applause. I took the glass, my fingertips hesitating. It wasn't because I was moved, but because I heard something strange in that applause. It didn't sound like a celebration. It sounded like nails being hammered into a board that had already been prepared. The party that night was to celebrate Lockwood Development winning a $750 million waterfront development project. It was the legacy my father, Arthur Vance, had left behind. As his only daughter, I had stepped into the role of chairwoman after his funeral. Yet in that VIP room, it was as if my husband had won the project all by himself. My mother-in-law, Eleanor Croft, sat at the center of the table in a regal purple velvet dress, a heavy jade necklace at her throat. She raised her wine glass to her side of the family. Was I wrong? When my Julian has a chance to prove himself, he's second to none. A man is born to be at the helm. A company of this size needs a man holding the reins. Her words pressed down on my chest like a boulder. Some fires don't start on their own. They burn because someone is secretly adding fuel to them. Leo Croft, Julian's younger brother, sat across from me. I had given him a job in Lockwood's procurement department after Julian pleaded on his behalf. When he first started, Leo had bowed his head and called me by my first name, every word respectful. But that night, his face flushed with wine, he clapped his brother on the back. "I'm telling you, since Julian took direct control of the project division, Lockwood has finally started to look like a major corporation. Alara is brilliant. No one denies that, but construction sites, materials, partners, you still need a man to push through and get things done." I set my glass down. "So, I suppose in the years before Julian joined management, Lockwood just sprouted from the ground on its own, Leo?" The table fell silent. Leo's face stiffened. "Oh, don't say that. You're still the chairwoman. Who would dare forget you?" Beside Eleanor, Chloe, Julian's sister, was filming everything with her phone. Since I had placed her in the internal communications department, Julian's image had appeared more and more frequently. I, on the other hand, was often pictured with my head down, signing papers, looking exhausted. Chloe panned her camera across the banquet. "Julian, look over here. I need to post this for the internal group. We have to show everyone who's bringing Lockwood into a new era." The camera lingered on Julian's face, then slid past me as quickly as it would a piece of furniture. "The company's internal group or our families?" I asked. Chloe blinked. "Oh, Alara, don't be so difficult. I'm just filming for fun." I fell silent, not because I had lost the argument, but because I was starting to see the small pieces fit together. Near the side door, Marcus Thorne, Julian's cousin, had barely touched his food. Julian had brought him in to head internal security. Since Marcus's arrival, the camera in the chairwoman's office would occasionally be reported as under maintenance, and my meetings with Silas, my father's best friend, were often flagged as scheduling conflicts. That night, I realized the quietest person in the room was the one standing closest to the exit. Marcus was taking a call. His eyes darting toward me, it was unclear if he was looking at me or my juice glass. Julian placed a piece of lobster on my plate, his voice tender. "Eat, darling. You've worked so hard these past few months. Just enjoy yourself tonight. Let me worry about the company." I looked at him, the man who had held my hand at my father's funeral, and said, "From now on, you have me. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Because of those words, I had stepped back. I let him join the executive team, gave Leo a chance, let Chloe handle communications, and allowed Marcus to touch the security system. I thought trusting family was the decent thing to do. But that night, amidst the scent of garlic butter, truffle risotto, and seared scallops, I suddenly felt like a guest in the very house my father had spent his life building. Just as I brought the juice to my lips, a young waiter carrying a side dish walked by. He wore a white shirt with a name tag that read, Nathan Miller. Whether he slipped or was just clumsy, he spilled an entire glass of water on my emerald green silk gown. The cold liquid soaked through the fabric, and I jolted upright. Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. "Is this a five-star restaurant or a roadside diner? My daughter-in-law is wearing an expensive gown, not a dish rag." Leo scowled. Get the manager in here. This is supposed to be a celebration. You're ruining the mood. Chloe immediately lowered her phone. Marcus turned back from the side door. And Julian, he shot up the fastest. But what sent a chill down my spine wasn't the water on my dress. Julian wasn't looking at my wet gown, nor was he looking at the waiter. He was staring intently at the carrot orange juice in my hand. The glass was inches from my lips. For a split second, Julian's eyes were no longer gentle. They were sharp and panicked. The waiter bowed his head repeatedly. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I apologize to everyone. Please, let me escort you to the restroom to handle the stain. If the gown is damaged, the restaurant will take full responsibility." Eleanor was still fuming. "Go on then. Don't just stand there being an eyesore." Julian stepped forward, about to take my arm. "Let me take you." I looked at him, then at the glass on the table. For some reason, my hand instinctively pulled back. "It's fine. You stay and entertain our guests. I'll be right back." Julian froze. Chloe forced a smile. "Change quickly, Alara. I still need to get a shot of the whole family toasting." I didn't answer. I followed Nathan out of the VIP room. Behind me, the chatter resumed, but it no longer sounded natural. The restaurant hallway was thickly carpeted, and yellow lights cast long, distorted shadows of us on the floor. Some things look like accidents at first, but the most terrifying accidents are the ones that happen too conveniently for someone else. As soon as we were out of sight of the party, Nathan slowed his pace. He no longer had the flustered demeanor of an employee who had made a mistake. He leaned close to my ear, his voice trembling, almost breathless. "Miss Vance, listen to me. Don't go back to that table." I stopped in the middle of the hallway, my hand clutching the cold, wet silk against my stomach. The faint sound of music from the VIP room drifted through the closed door, but Nathan's words were like a bucket of ice water poured over my head. "What did you say?" Nathan swallowed hard, his face pale and his lips trembling, but his eyes met mine directly. "Don't go back to that table. Pretend you feel ill, and find a way to leave the restaurant immediately. Your husband, Mr. Croft, has arranged everything." I stared at the young waiter before me. He couldn't have been much older than 20, his hands shaking so badly that the towel he held was crumpled. But that night, there was something in his eyes I couldn't dismiss. I lowered my voice. "Nathan, do you know who I am?" "Yes, ma'am. You're Miss Alara Vance, chairwoman of Lockwood Development. But I'm not saying this because you're the chairwoman. I'm saying it because if you go back in there, you might not walk out on your own 2 feet." My heart pounded. Nathan pulled me back a few more steps, into a corner near the restrooms where a large vase of flowers partially hid us from view. "I don't have much time, ma'am." "What did you hear?" Nathan pulled a phone from his pocket. He played an audio file, the volume so low I had to press my ear close to hear it. At first, there was the clatter of dishes and the squeak of a service cart. Then a man's voice emerged. It was a voice I had heard for over 10 years at dinner tables, at my father's funeral, in promises that all he wanted was for his wife to be at peace. Julian's voice. "Get it done cleanly tonight. Once she drinks it, take her out the side door. The power of attorney and the temporary project transfer documents are all ready. Don't let her come to before it's done." The blood in my veins turned to ice. It was immediately followed by a deeper, clipped voice that sounded like Marcus. "I've handled the side door camera. The car is behind the restaurant. But what if she demands an ambulance?" Julian's reply was a soft whisper. "There will be no ambulance. Family will take her home. Just say my wife felt unwell and didn't want a scene." The recording stopped. The glass of carrot orange juice reappeared in my mind. Julian's hand raising the glass, his smile, his words. The most important woman in my life. It turned out the most important person could also be the most carefully calculated target. I gripped the edge of the sink, trying to keep my voice steady. "When did you record this?" "Yesterday afternoon. I was pushing a utility cart past the VIP room corridor. I heard your name, then the words power of attorney, side door, no ambulance. I got scared, so I turned on my recorder. But I only got that much before Mr. Thorne looked out, and I had to move along." "So tonight you spilled the water on purpose?" Nathan nodded, his eyes turning red. "Yes, I asked to switch shifts to serve your room." At first, I hoped I had misheard. Who would plot against his own wife at a celebration? But when I saw your drink brought out separately from an inner bar, not on the same tray as the others, I knew something was wrong. My father had always taught me that when faced with a crisis, don't ask the heavens why it's so cruel. Ask what path you have left. The panicked lose everything. The calm can still turn the tables. I opened my eyes. "Who made that drink?" Nathan glanced out into the hallway, then spoke quickly. I don't know his name, but it was a man at the inner counter. Before the party, Mr. Thorne was talking to the shift manager. Afterward, the manager gave us separate instructions. The VIP guests were special. If Mr. Croft's wife felt unwell, we were to notify the family, not call an ambulance or make a scene on our own. I let out a bitter laugh. Mr. Croft's wife. It sounded so grand that even her health had to be approved by her in-laws. Nathan bowed his head. Ma'am, I'm just a part-time waiter. I don't know what was in that glass, but I know they don't want you to be conscious. Why are you helping me? Nathan bit his lip, hesitating for a long moment before answering. My mother had heart surgery at Mount Sinai, funded by Lockwood's Charity Foundation. Back then, we had sold everything we owned, and it still wasn't enough. A woman from the foundation came to our house and said the program was approved and signed by you. My mom is alive today because of that. Every time she hears the name Lockwood, she clasps her hands and says, when someone saves you, you have to remember it. He looked up. His voice choked with emotion. I may be poor, ma'am, but I'm not so poor that I can watch someone harm my mother's benefactor and do nothing. His words made my eyes sting. In that room, the people who called me wife, daughter-in-law, and sister-in-law were waiting for me to drink a glass of who knows what. Out here in the hallway, a young stranger was trembling as he tried to save me. Nathan, listen to me. From now on, do not confront anyone in there. Keep this recording, email a copy to yourself, or give it to someone you trust. Remember the face of the person who made the drink. Remember the manager's name if you know it. Remember who said what, where they were standing, and at what time. But do not, under any circumstances, tell anyone you warned me. Nathan nodded rapidly. What about you, ma'am? Can you leave now? I can lead you out through the staff exit. I looked toward the VIP room. Inside were my mother-in-law, my husband, Leo, Chloe, Marcus, and a table full of relatives, all laughing and talking. If I disappeared now, they would know the plan was exposed. Marcus was standing near the side door. He certainly wouldn't let me leave easily. I spoke slowly. Not yet. If I run now, they'll come after me immediately. I have to make them believe I'm just feeling ill. Nathan's face grew paler. But going back is dangerous. I won't drink anything else. Where's the restaurant's staff break room? Down the hall, turn left. There's a female staff member on duty there. Good. In a moment, stand near the door, but don't look at me too much. When I say I feel dizzy, you call that staff member immediately. I need someone who isn't family to be with me. Nathan's voice trembled. Ma'am, please be careful. I see Mr. Thorne keeps watching the side door. I nodded. I now understood Julian's goal. He didn't need to steal all of Lockwood in one night. He just needed me incapacitated long enough to sign the power of attorney documents. Afterward, with the health records, Chloe's media spin, my mother-in-law's narrative, and a chorus of relatives, he would paint me as a broken woman who needed her husband to take the reins. That trap wasn't built with a single glass of juice. It was built over months of me blindly trusting the words, family. I adjusted my wet gown and looked in the mirror. The woman in the reflection was pale, her eyes red, but her back was straight. You haven't drunk the juice, I told myself. That means fate has left you a way out. Then I turned and walked back toward the VIP room, where the husband who had just called me the most important person in his life was waiting to see if I would fall. I returned to the entrance of the VIP room, forcing myself to slow each step. It was just a short walk down a hallway, but it felt like wading through a river of knives. Inside, the laughter and chatter were still lively. The air, thick with the scent of lobster, wine, and expensive perfume, felt so luxurious it was artificial. I stood outside the door for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and deliberately made my face look paler. Nathan followed about 3 paces behind, his head bowed like a waiter afraid of being scolded, but I knew he was watching every corner of the hall. The moment Chloe saw me, she raised her phone. Alara, you're back. Perfect. I'm filming another round of toasts for the whole family. Before I could reply, Eleanor glanced at me from head to toe. You were gone that long for a little spill? Sit down, dear. The party's in full swing. Julian stood up immediately. He approached and put a hand on my elbow to support me. Are you okay? Why is your face so pale? His hand was light, but his fingers gripped my arm tighter than necessary. I looked at him, intentionally making my voice small and weak. I'm a little dizzy. I must be tired. A flicker of light crossed Julian's eyes. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought it was concern. Then I'll take you home. Let's go now. The others can stay. As he spoke, he gently pulled me toward the side door. Not the main entrance, but the very door Marcus had been guarding all evening. I immediately sagged, clutching my stomach. No, I feel really sick. Please, call an ambulance. The room fell silent. The words, call an ambulance, landed like a shattered plate. The first person whose expression changed was Julian. That's not necessary, darling. It's probably just low blood pressure. I'll take you home to rest, and you'll be fine. I looked him straight in the eye. I need a doctor, not a side door. Julian's face darkened for half a second before he forced a laugh. What a strange thing to say. I'm your husband. What's wrong with me taking you home through whichever door is convenient? Eleanor slammed her wine glass on the table. Alara, why are you making such a scene? Calling an ambulance for a bit of dizziness? People will laugh at us. Don't let outsiders think this family doesn't know how to care for you. In the past, whenever she mentioned the words, this family, I would have known to back down. But tonight was different, a little more submission, and I could lose my entire life. I said quietly, Mother, I really am dizzy. I just want a doctor to check on me. Leo smirked, holding his glass. Alara, being chairwoman has made you stressed and weak, nerved. Women who take on too much burn out easily. It's right to hand things over to Julian. I looked at Leo. He avoided my gaze, but his mouth still held a mocking smile. Chloe raised her phone, her voice feigning concern. Sit down, Alara. Let me film this so we can remind you to take care of your health later. From behind, Nathan stepped forward, holding a clean cloth. He positioned himself to almost block Chloe's camera angle. Ma'am, let me call the restaurant staff to assist you. Chloe frowned. Move aside, I'm filming. Nathan bowed. My apologies, but the guest is unwell. Our policy requires us to address that first. For the first time, I saw a young waiter render Chloe speechless. Just then, Marcus moved from his post at the side door. He stepped into the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear. A decorative mirror clearly reflected his image, his gaze fixed on me. He wasn't looking at a sick person, but at a piece of merchandise that had just slipped from the plan. I deliberately leaned on the edge of the table, pretending I couldn't stand. Julian immediately leaned close to my ear. Alara, don't make a scene. If anything, we'll call Dr. Evans to the house when we get home. I whispered back. A sick person who has to choose a doctor based on her husband's preference? That's strange, isn't it? Julian's eyes darkened. Eleanor stood up, her voice sharper. Daughters, in-law these days are something else. Your mother-in-law says one thing, you argue back. An erratic wife brings ruin to the house. I said go home and rest, so we go home and rest. Why make a fuss about an ambulance? I let out a very soft laugh. After laughing, I bowed my head as if truly faint. Don't worry, Mother. I haven't lost my mind yet. I'm just afraid that if I stay silent any longer, I won't have the chance to speak again. That sentence silenced the entire table. Julian quickly interjected. You're tired and talking nonsense. Nathan, right? Is your name Nathan? Go get the manager and prepare a car for me. Nathan kept his head bowed. Yes, sir. But according to restaurant policy, if a guest shows signs of severe dizziness, we must have our staff assess them first. We can only assist with a car if necessary. What policy? Julian snapped quietly. Nathan answered respectfully. Guest safety regulations, sir. A female employee in a black suit ran over, her name tag reading, Sarah. Nathan spoke quickly. Sarah, the guest in the VIP room is dizzy after a water spillage incident. I recommend we escort her to the staff break room. Sarah looked at me, then turned to Julian. Sir, to ensure her safety, may I escort the lady to our staff break room for a preliminary check? If she doesn't feel better, we will call for medical assistance immediately. Julian forced a stiff smile. That won't be necessary. I'm her husband. I can take care of her myself. I immediately grabbed Sarah's hand. Please, take me. I'm having trouble breathing. Eleanor inhaled sharply. Chloe lowered her phone. Leo set his glass down so hard that the liquor sloshed. Marcus returned from the hallway, his eyes sweeping over Nathan before landing on Sarah. My entire family-in-law, not one of them asked where I was hurting. They just looked at each other with the eyes of people whose game had just gone awry. I leaned on Sarah as she escorted me out of the room. Julian still followed closely beside me. I'm coming with you. I stopped. That's not necessary. I just want a female staff member with me. You should stay and entertain the guests. After all, everyone is here to celebrate your success today. The last sentence was spoken softly, but after hearing it, Julian's face went white. Eleanor called after me. Alara, don't be so dramatic. A smart woman knows how to save face for her husband. I didn't turn back, only replying, I know, mother. I'm saving something, but this time I'm saving my own life first. Once in the hallway, I saw Nathan step back, still holding the cloth. As I passed him, I gave a slight nod. Nathan understood. I was taken to the small staff break room at the end of the hall. As soon as I sat down, I opened my purse and took out the burner phone hidden in a zippered compartment. I sent a message to Silas. I'm in danger. Julian is plotting a takeover. Activate the chairman's protection protocol. The second message went to my lawyer, Ethan Hayes. As of tonight, I am not signing or authorizing any documents. Any paperwork that arises should be considered non-consensual. After sending the messages, I looked up. Through the frosted glass of the staff break room door, Julian's silhouette paced back and forth, lingering for a long time. I had walked out of that banquet, but I knew the real hunt had just begun. Sarah checked my blood pressure and asked if I needed an ambulance. I looked at her, then at the frosted glass door outside. Julian's shadow was still there, standing motionless like a post in the middle of the hallway. I lowered my voice. Sarah, I need to get out of here through another exit. The fewer people who know, the better. Sarah paused, stunned. She had probably worked in the restaurant for years, dealing with all kinds of drunk, jealous, or fighting guests. But she likely had never encountered a wife who, in the middle of her own celebration, had to find a way to escape from her husband. Before she could answer, Nathan knocked and brought in a glass of warm water. Sarah, the manager needs you at the front desk for a moment. Is it all right if I assist the guest here? Sarah looked at me. I gave a slight nod. She understood and stepped out. Nathan closed the door and spoke quickly. Miss Vance, the back of the staff break room leads to the staff area. I've called the number you gave me earlier. A gentleman is waiting at the side entrance near the kitchen. I stood up, my legs a little weak. Not because of that drink I hadn't touched it, but because something inside me had just collapsed. A collapse of trust can make you feel as dizzy as a sudden drop in blood pressure. Nathan handed me a black staff jacket. Put this on and keep your head down. There's a camera in this section, but it's for the kitchen area and won't capture a guest's face directly. I looked at him. You're putting yourself in danger. Nathan gave a wry smile. I already spilled water on your dress. I'm going to get chewed out either way. A little more won't hurt. But if I let them take you out that side door, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. His words made my throat tighten. People say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes, plain water is clearer than blood. I followed him out the small door at the back of the staff break room. The corridor behind it was narrow, smelling of dish soap, cooking oil, and leftover food. Kitchen staff were busy at their stations, paying little attention to a woman in a black jacket walking quickly behind a waiter. Near the side entrance, Nathan stopped. Go straight to that silver car. I can't go any further, or they might get suspicious. I squeezed his hand for a second. Nathan, keep your phone safe. Don't tell anyone at the restaurant that you spoke to me. Yes, ma'am. I stepped outside. The cold night air from the river hit my face. A silver car was parked at the curb. The back door opened. Silas was sitting inside, his hair grayer than the last time I'd seen him. Get in, Alara. Just those 3 words, I almost burst into tears. The car pulled away from the restaurant. Through the rear window, I could see the yellow lights of the VIP room still glowing. I wondered if Julian had realized I was gone. I wondered if Eleanor could still maintain her dignified expression. Silas looked at me in the rearview mirror. Are you hurt anywhere? I didn't drink it. Then you're fortunate. I immediately said, don't take me to my villa. Don't take me to my husband's house. You know Marcus controls my security systems. I turned to look at him. Silas spoke calmly, but every word chilled me. I know. When did you realize? Realize what? That your father's last line of defense wasn't the will he left you, but the people he left for you. I was stunned. Silas continued. Your father knew Julian wasn't simple. You knew? How long have you known? I've known he wasn't simple for a long time, but you still trusted your husband. If I said too much, I would have just been an outsider trying to break up your home. The car turned off the riverfront road and headed toward Ethan Hayes' law firm. My primary phone began to vibrate incessantly, the screen lighting up with Julian's name. 1 call, 2, 5, 10. I didn't answer. Silas said, let it ring. Don't turn it off. Missed calls are also a trail. I let the phone lie on my lap, its buzzing making my palm go numb. By the time the car stopped in front of a low-rise office building, the screen showed 37 missed calls. Ethan Hayes was already waiting. He was in a white dress shirt, his face as alert as someone who had just left a meeting. not been woken up in the middle of the night. Alara, come inside. From now on, everything you say, receive, and see must be documented. I sat down in his office, the white light illuminating a desk covered in files. Outside the window, New York was dark, but in my head, everything was screaming. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Chloe. Don't overdo it, Alara. Lockwood can't stay in a woman's hands forever. It's a blessing for you that Julian is taking over. I read it and laughed, a dry, pained laugh, like I had a fishbone stuck in my throat. Leo texted next. If you know what's good for you, just sign. Julian will still let you live in luxury, your title intact. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. A moment later, Marcus sent a single sentence. It's not too late to come back. No exclamation point, no lengthy threat. That's what made it so cold. A call came from one of my husband's relatives. I didn't answer. It was immediately followed by a voicemail from Eleanor. Ethan told me to put it on speaker and record it with another device. Eleanor's voice, no longer sweet as it was with guests, filled the room. Alara, what kind of game are you playing? The entire family is sitting here, and you just walk out without a word? Do you want to drag our family's name through the mud? A smart woman knows how to protect her husband, to protect our dignity. Don't think that just because you have some shares, you can do whatever you want. I stared at the screen. A mother-in-law who was genuinely worried about her daughter-in-law would have asked, "Where are you? Are you okay?" Eleanor didn't ask. She only asked where her family's dignity had gone. Ethan placed a piece of paper in front of me. Write down the sequence of events, from when the waiter spilled the water until you left the restaurant. Be as specific as possible. Who stood where? Who said what? Write down everything you can remember. I picked up the pen, my fingers trembling. Ethan continued. All text messages, screenshot them. All calls, log them. That audio file from Nathan must be backed up. Tomorrow morning, I will draft a preliminary notice to all relevant parties, stating that you will not sign, fingerprint, or authorize any documents under duress, with your health compromised, or with your freedom restricted. Silas sat across from me, his hands clasped. Your father once entrusted me with something. I looked up. What was it? Silas paused before speaking. Mr. Vance left a sealed envelope. He instructed that it only be opened if you were cornered by those closest to you, to the point where you could no longer protect your position as chairwoman. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. My father, he foresaw this with Julian? Silas didn't answer directly. His silence was more painful than a nod. Your father never forbade you from loving, but he spent his life in business. He judged people not just by their smiles. He once told me his daughter was brilliant at big things but soft-hearted with family. A soft heart is a blessing, but in the wrong place, it becomes a blade. I looked down as a tear fell onto the paper I was writing on. That night, I cried for the first time. Not because I was afraid of Julian, not because I was afraid of losing Lockwood. I cried because I remembered the day my father died. I had leaned on my husband's shoulder, thinking I still had a pillar of support in my life. It turned out, the person who had secretly built another pillar for me was the one lying in his grave. Ethan pushed a box of tissues toward me. It's okay to cry, but don't stop writing. Crying is for the heart. Evidence is for your survival. I wiped my tears and continued to write. Outside, my phone screen kept lighting up with Julian's name, but this time I no longer saw it as a call from my husband. It looked like the knocking of a trap that had just missed its prey. The clock on Ethan's office wall showed nearly 2 a.m. I thought it would just be me, Silas, and Ethan picking up the broken pieces of a marriage. But less than half an hour later, there was a soft knock on the glass door outside. Ethan went to open it. A woman with silver-streaked hair walked in, clutching an old brown tote bag, her eyes unusually bright. I shot to my feet. Miss Reed? Helen Reed had been Lockwood's chief accountant for over 20 years, with my father since the company operated out of a rented one-story office. A few months ago, she had been pushed out of the company, accused of leaking bid prices. At the time, Julian had told me, "Don't be sentimental. Old-timers sometimes get complacent and are no longer a good fit." I had believed him. Helen placed the tote bag on the table. Inside were photocopied contracts and several worn-out notebooks. She looked at me, her voice trembling but clear. "I never betrayed your father, Alara. I was just waiting for the day you were ready to look again." That one sentence made my face burn. Some mistakes aren't made out of malice, but out of misplaced trust. But misplaced trust can kill good people. I walked over and took her hand. "Miss Reed, I am so sorry." Helen shook her head. "No need for apologies. Let's save the company first. The dead leave behind a legacy. If the living can't protect it, they have failed the founders. Silas pulled a chair out for her. Ethan turned on the scanner, placed a voice recorder on the table, and said, "Miss Reed, please present everything in chronological order. Where it's an opinion, state it as such. Where you have documentation, point it out." Helen opened the first file. It was a list of materials contracts handled by Leo's procurement department. As I looked at the long columns of numbers, my heart grew cold. This is the steel shipment for the waterfront project. The purchase price is nearly 18% higher than the market rate at the time. This is the cement, split into 3 smaller contracts, each just below the threshold requiring board oversight. And this, heavy machinery leased by the month, but the invoices are billed as a lump sum service package. I frowned. Leo did all this? On paper, it's the procurement department. But the person who initialed the proposals was Leo. The final approval has Julian's digital signature. Helen pulled out another sheet. After these funds were paid to the suppliers, they were funneled through 2 intermediary companies. One is registered to a college friend of Leo's, the other to a distant cousin of Eleanor's. The money doesn't go directly to the Croft family, but its path isn't clean. I listened, my hands gripping the edge of the table. How many times at the dinner table had Eleanor told me I had to be good to my brother-in-law, to give Leo a chance to prove himself? It turned out the chance I gave him had been turned into a straw stuck into my father's company. Ethan asked, "Why didn't you bring this to Miss Vance directly before?" Helen gave a sad smile. I requested meetings several times, but the secretary always said the chairwoman was busy. My emails went unanswered. Once, I went up to the executive floor, and Marcus blocked me at the door, telling me I no longer had business there. 3 days later, I was blamed for the price leak. My eyes stung. They weren't just taking money, they were cutting off my ears and covering my eyes, leaving me to sit in the chairwoman's seat like a clean, oblivious puppet. The door opened again. David Quinn, Lockwood's former head of legal, walked in with a rolling briefcase. He had been transferred to a regional branch after refusing to sign off on some temporary power of attorney documents Julian had pushed. He opened the briefcase and placed several binders on the table. "This is a template for proxy voting of shares. This is for voting at shareholder meetings. And this is a document for the temporary transfer of authority over the $750 million project to Mr. Croft. In the event, the chairwoman is not in a fit state of health." At the time, they wanted me to phrase it like a family matter, but with enough legal force for Julian to vote on your behalf. I flipped through the pages. The dry, legal text stabbed at my eyes, more painful than any insult. They didn't need to tie my hands with rope. With just one signature while I was unconscious, they could have bound me with the law. David continued, "I refused to sign. After that, I was transferred. My replacement was someone Julian recommended." Ethan took notes quickly. "These drafts need to be saved, cross-referenced with creation dates, user access logs, and internal emails. It's not a conclusion, but it's enough to prove premeditation." Suddenly, Silas's phone rang. He put it on speaker. A young man's voice came through. It was Kevin, a former IT technician. "Silas, I checked the old logs. Access rights to the executive floor were changed at least 6 times in 3 months. A secondary admin account was granted to Marcus, but without a complete approval record." I asked immediately, "Do the days the cameras were under maintenance coincide with Silas's appointments to see me?" There was a pause on the other end. "Yes, at least 3 times. And your schedule, Miss Vance, was changed by the new secretary's account right before those appointments." The room fell silent. No one spoke, but the truth was sitting in the middle of the table. I used to think I was too busy and had neglected old colleagues. I thought Helen was at fault, that David was too rigid, that Silas worried too much. It turned out I wasn't too busy. Someone had built a cage around me using meeting schedules, passwords, cameras, and my husband's sweet nothings. Helen looked at me, her voice slow. "Alara, he didn't try to steal your chair in one night. He pulled the rug out from under you, inch by inch." Ethan closed a file. "From now on, we follow the evidence trail. Finance is one branch, legal another, security data a third, and the restaurant a fourth. We don't make a move until we're ready, or the snake will turn and bite." Silas nodded. "He won't sit still tomorrow morning. If tonight's plan failed, he'll try to legitimize his power with a meeting." I looked at each person before me, Helen with her old tote bag, David with his briefcase, Silas with his gray hair, Ethan calmly taking notes. They weren't shouting loyalty. They just quietly brought the truth back to me. I wiped my tears and pulled the files closer. Then we'll get one step ahead. I'm not hiding tomorrow. I'm entering the company through the main entrance. Silas looked at me for a long time, as if seeing my father's shadow. That's right. You're Arthur Vance's daughter. No one takes your father's chair through a side door. Outside, the New York night was still dark. But in that room, for the first time since the lobster dinner, I saw a sliver of light. Not the light of luck, but the light of evidence. Just as I said I would enter through the main entrance, David pulled his laptop closer, the screen casting a cold blue light on his face. Alara, there's one more thing you need to see before morning. He opened a hidden folder in a backup of the old legal drive. Inside were several draft media files, named concisely, Chairwoman Health Update, Temporary Operations Plan, Approved Images for Use. I stared at the file names, my scalp tingling. David opened the first one. The headline alone was like a knife to my reputation. Chairwoman Alara Vance to take temporary leave due to health concerns. Julian Croft to oversee key projects. I read the words over and over. Temporary leave. Health concerns. Julian Croft to oversee. If this announcement had been released while I was unconscious, shareholders would have panicked, partners would have wavered, and employees would have looked to Julian as the man saving the company from chaos. Chloe wasn't just a girl filming dinner parties. She had prepared the obituary for my authority, just waiting for me to be pushed down before putting them on display. Helen moved her chair closer, pointing to the attached photos. Look at these. I leaned in. There was a photo of me in a meeting, my face pale after 2 all-nighters working on the project proposal. Another showed me rubbing my temples. A third captured me sitting silently, staring out the window after a tense meeting with the bank. All of them were cropped and selected to make me look exhausted and weak, like someone on the verge of collapse. I laughed, but my throat was tight with bitterness. For months, Chloe hadn't been doing communications. She had been a hunter. Ethan looked at me and said simply, "They weren't just trying to take your power, they wanted to take your image first. Once a person is labeled as weak, every decision they make from then on is easily doubted." David played a video clip. In it, I slammed my hand on the table and scolded an employee. "I've told you 3 times. A single comma out of place in a bid proposal can make this company lose everything." The clip ended there. It didn't show the part before, where the employee had unilaterally changed a price appendix. It didn't show the part after, where I calmly instructed him to correct it according to procedure, without insulting anyone. All that remained was an image of a volatile, out-of-control Alara. I stared at the screen for a long time. A woman can be killed with a knife, but she can also be killed with a few seconds of manipulative editing. Helen sighed. I saw the original footage. That employee made a serious mistake. But if you only show this clip to the shareholders, they'll say you've lost your composure. Silas narrowed his eyes. Classic Chloe. She doesn't need to lie about everything. She just needs to hide half the truth. Ethan opened the health file and placed it next to the laptop. And this is the more dangerous layer. I saw my own general health report from a few months ago. Julian had insisted I get a checkup. He'd said I was working too hard, staying up too late. He was worried. He loved me. He just wanted peace of mind. I even remembered that morning he had personally made me oatmeal and put vitamins in my bag. Now, in a supplemental note, there was a sentence that chilled me to the bone. Patient shows signs of prolonged stress. Recommend limiting executive pressures. Decision-making support from family is advised. I looked up sharply. No one ever told me about this sentence. Ethan replied, "It could be an internal note, a reinterpreted summary, or they could have used a real result to build a false narrative. But when you place it next to the edited clip, the photos of you looking tired, and a power of attorney document produced overnight, the picture becomes very dangerous." I suddenly remembered Julian's voice in the car that day. "Just get the checkup, honey, for my peace of mind. Money and work are important, but your health is what matters most. Words of love, from the right person, are a warm blanket. From the wrong person, they become a net thrown over your head." I pressed my fingers to my forehead. Not because I was tired, but because every detail was fitting together too perfectly. Helen opened another folder of pre-printed internal communications photos. In every shot, Julian stood in the center, wearing a crisp white shirt and a hard hat, pointing at blueprints or shaking hands with partners. The captions were glowing. The project leader, the man unraveling on-site knots, the one bringing new energy to Lockwood. And me? In those same newsletters, I only appeared at the edge of the frame. Sometimes my head was down, signing documents. Sometimes I was sitting and listening. Sometimes I was caught just as I squinted from a camera flash. Helen said, I noticed this a long time ago. Your name was still chairwoman, but your image was fading. Julian's, meanwhile, was getting brighter. An outsider looking in would eventually think you were just a figurehead, and he was the one doing the real work. I gave a bitter smile. I used to think in a marriage, if one person shines, the whole family shines. I never imagined he was using my shadow to polish his own image. Silas tapped his fingers on the table. Tomorrow morning, he'll call a meeting. It won't be official, but it will be enough to create pressure. He'll say you're in a panic, that you abandoned the party, that your health is unstable. The company needs someone to step up. If we're late, he'll have the minutes drafted. Ethan nodded. I'll prepare the legal documents. Silas, prepare your credentials as a board member. Helen and David, bring your files. Alara, you just need to remember one thing. Do not lose your temper. They want you to lose your temper. I fell silent, my mind replaying the banquet, the glass of juice, the look in Julian's eyes. Eleanor's words about a woman saving face for her husband. For so many years, I had done just that, to the point that people thought I had no hands left to save myself. Near dawn, my former assistant, Leah, brought a black pantsuit. The moment she saw me, she started to cry. Alara, I'm so sorry. They moved me off the executive floor, so I didn't know anything. I patted her shoulder. It's okay. You're helping me today, and that's enough. I went into a small room to change. The green silk gown, damp from the cold water, was folded in a paper bag. I looked at it for a long moment. Last night, if not for that water stain, I might have drunk that juice to the sound of my in-laws' applause. I put on the black suit, tied my hair back neatly, and wiped the smudged lipstick from my lips. The woman in the mirror was no longer the wife who sat silently while her husband's family sang his praises. I opened the door and stepped out. Silas, Ethan, Helen, and David all stood up. I spoke each word clearly. This morning, I enter through the main entrance. My father left me his chair, and I am not taking the back door. No one applauded. No one said anything grand. But the look in their eyes told me I was no longer alone. Just as the sky began to brighten, I stood before the main entrance of the Lockwood Development Building. The 1-2-story tower emerged from a thin mist, its gray glass facade as cold and impassive as if nothing had happened. The elderly security guard, upon seeing me, straightened up in surprise. Good morning, Chairwoman. I nodded. The word chairwoman sounded different that morning. It was no longer just a title on a nameplate. It was a reminder to walk steadily. Silas was on my right. Ethan, Helen, and David followed closely behind. Leah clutched a binder of documents. The company lobby was brightly lit. The receptionists looked up and shot to their feet. Some bowed their heads, others exchanged glances, as if seeing someone they thought had vanished. I didn't ask any questions. The more questions I asked, the more I would seem like someone searching for her own authority. I just walked straight to the private elevator. When we reached the 12th floor, my new secretary, the young woman Julian had recommended a few months ago, was standing guard in front of the main conference room. The moment she saw me, she stammered, Miss Vance, Chairwoman, Mr. Croft is holding an expanded executive meeting today. I looked at her. A meeting for my company that I wasn't informed about? Her face flushed. Well, Mr. Croft said you weren't well and that you should rest. I said only, later you will remain here to work with the legal department regarding all my canceled appointments over the past 3 months. The conference room door was slightly ajar. Inside, the room was full. The large screen was already displaying the words, Proposal for Stabilizing Operations of the Waterfront Project. Stacks of printed proposals sat on the table. Through the glass, I saw Julian sitting at the head of the table in my seat. The nameplate Alara Vance, chairwoman of the board, had been pushed aside. In front of Julian, a microphone was on and a glass of water was placed, ready. A pang of pain shot through my chest. Not for the chair itself, but because my father had once sat in that seat and said, "This place isn't for someone who wants to be important. It's for someone who dares to be responsible." And that morning, my husband sat there as if he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Leo stood by the screen, a laser pointer in his hand, his face filled with the eager excitement of someone about to be declared a hero. Chloe sat near the window, a tablet on her lap and her phone propped on a small stand. With a single tap, a pre-written press release could fly across the company. Marcus stood near the entrance, his arms crossed. He glanced at me quickly, then looked down the hallway. Outside the glass wall, Eleanor stood with several of Julian's relatives. She held no position at Lockwood, but she stood there as if intending to turn a corporate meeting into a family trial of a daughter-in-law. I pushed the door open. The conversations in the room died instantly. A dozen pairs of eyes turned to me, some surprised, some flustered. Julian, mid-sentence, froze. Alara, what are you doing here? I placed my handbag on the table, right in front of my displaced nameplate. I pulled the nameplate back to its rightful position. Are you practicing for your role as chairman while I'm still alive? The air in the room solidified. Leo swallowed hard. Chloe quickly turned off her tablet screen. Marcus shifted his weight slightly toward the door. Julian stood up, forcing a smile. What a thing to say. I'm just holding a meeting to stabilize operations. You left so abruptly last night. Everyone was worried. If your health isn't good, you should be resting, not causing a scene in front of the executive team. I looked him straight in the eye. The executive team? Or an expanded meeting of your family? A few people looked down. Outside, Eleanor tapped lightly on the glass. Julian, speak to her gently. A tired woman is prone to making trouble. I glanced at her through the glass, then turned back to Julian. I request that this entire meeting be recorded and minuted, starting from the moment I walked in. Mr. Hayes, if you would. Ethan placed a recorder on the table. I am Ethan Hayes, legal counsel representing Miss Alara Vance. I request that all statements made in this meeting be fully recorded. A minor shareholder sitting to Julian's right spoke up. Chairwoman Vance, we were only told by Mr. Croft that you needed to rest, so the company required a temporary plan. If you are still able to lead, that's wonderful. But about last night, I nodded. What happened last night will be presented with evidence, not with rumors. Julian's face tightened. Don't let outsiders manipulate you. This is a matter between husband and wife, and an internal company affair. I'm stepping up for you when you're weak. What's wrong with that? I pulled out a chair and sat down next to the head of the table. No snatching, no yelling, stepping up, or seizing power. Clarify that for everyone here. Julian was speechless. Leo quickly interjected. Alara, Julian is doing this for the company. The $750 million project can't wait for your mood to stabilize. If investors hear that the chairwoman abandoned a party and was out of contact all night, of course they'd be worried. I turned to Leo. Are you worried about the investors? Or are you worried about your procurement department being audited? Leo's face changed color. Chloe immediately forced a smile. Don't make accusations. We're family. Who would harm you? It's just that communications needs clear information to reassure the staff. I glanced at the tablet on her lap. Clear information? Or the pre-written obituary for my reputation? Chloe bit her lip. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low. The chairwoman should remain calm. The company's cameras are active. Everyone can see your attitude. I smiled. Thank you, Marcus, for mentioning the cameras. I was also about to ask why the cameras on the executive floor have been under maintenance so often over the past 3 months, always at the exact time my father's old colleagues came to see me. Marcus went silent. In the room, those who had been leaning toward Julian began to look at one another. At first, they thought I had come to cry or argue. But I didn't cry. I didn't slam the table. I just asked the right questions. Julian lowered his voice. Alara, you're agitated. Go home. I'll explain everything later. Don't make a fool of yourself. I looked at the man who, just last night, had raised a glass and called me the most important person in his life. This chair is not your dinner table, where you can sit wherever you please. And I am not a puppet your mother can pull the strings of whenever she pleases. Outside, Eleanor's face went pale. Julian clenched his fists. I turned to Ethan. Let's begin. I want this meeting to have all the faces, all the voices, and all the evidence. If anyone says I'm not of sound mind, let's make it clear today. Ethan pressed the record button again. Silas placed the first binder on the table. Helen sat down opposite Leo. David opened his laptop. I sat up straight, my hands flat on the table. That morning, I was no longer sitting at the edge of anyone's picture. The moment Ethan started the recording, it felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the conference room. I looked at each face around the table. Some had been with my father for years. Others were new hires brought in by Julian. There were also a few minor shareholders who only heard news through the grapevine. They were waiting for me to lose my temper or break down. I opened my phone and put it on speaker. Before we discuss my state of mind, I invite everyone to listen to this. I pressed play. First, the sound of a cart and clinking dishes. Then Julian's voice filled the room, so clear it sent a chill down my own spine. Get it done cleanly tonight. Once she drinks it, take her out the side door. The power of attorney and the temporary project transfer documents are all ready. Don't let her come to before it's done. No one spoke. Julian's face was frozen. Leo's eyes widened as he stared at his brother. Chloe looked down at her tablet, her finger hovering over the screen. Marcus, near the door, tensed his jaw. An older shareholder slowly took off his glasses. "Mr. Croft, is that your voice?" Julian took a deep breath, then laughed weakly. An audio clip from an unknown source. "In this day and age, editing is easy. I'm her husband. Why would I harm my own wife?" I didn't respond. I projected my phone's screen onto the large monitor. Chloe's text message appeared for the whole room to see. "Lockwood can't stay in a woman's hands forever." Then Leo's message. "If you know what's good for you, just sign. Julian will still let you live in luxury." And finally, Marcus's. "It's not too late to come back." I turned to Julian. "You say the recording could be fake. Are the text messages from your entire family sent the night I escaped the restaurant also fake?" Leo quickly interjected, "Don't twist every word." I was worried, so I might have been a bit harsh. "It's a family matter. We should settle it behind closed doors." I looked at him. "Settling things behind closed doors is for fixing small mistakes, not for dragging me out a side door." Ethan stood up and read calmly. "Last night, my client sent an urgent notice that she would not sign, fingerprint, or authorize any documents while her health was being interfered with, while under threat, or while her freedom was restricted. Any documents produced after that point will require verification of their voluntary and legal nature." The atmosphere in the room grew thick. Julian placed both hands on the table. "That's enough, Alara. You're being manipulated by outsiders. I don't know what that waiter told you, but you abandoned a party, went incommunicado, and then showed up this morning with a lawyer. Do you think that's normal behavior?" As if waiting for that cue, Chloe stood up and connected her tablet to the screen. "Allow me to show everyone some internal materials to help understand Alara's mental state recently." The video clip of me slamming the table played, my sharp voice echoing in the room. "I've told you 3 times. A single comma out of place in a bid proposal can make this company lose everything." The clip stopped right there, a few people murmured. Outside the glass wall, Eleanor immediately pounded on the door. "See? She's so volatile. How can she possibly lead? I'm her mother-in-law, and even I don't dare to speak to her harshly." I turned back. The phrase "don't dare to speak harshly" coming from her almost made me laugh out loud. Chloe then displayed the photos. Me rubbing my temples. Me sitting silently in a meeting. Me with my head bowed after 2 sleepless nights. Alara has been overworked. Julian just wanted to help her take a break. If the chairwoman isn't stable, the entire company will suffer. 2 new employees stood up. One said he had seen me forget a meeting and snap at staff. Another looked down and said she once had to call my name several times before I heard her. I looked at them not with anger, but with sadness. For a small promotion, a promised raise, some people were willing to hammer another nail into the coffin of someone's reputation. Julian seized the moment. "Alara, I did it all for you. If you're weak, let me support you. Why do you insist on thinking your whole family is trying to harm you?" I clenched my fists under the table. For a moment, I wanted to scream in his face. A man who wants to support his wife doesn't prepare a separate drink, a side door, and power of attorney documents in the middle of the night. But I remembered my father's words. A leader doesn't win with shouts. A leader wins with evidence. I relaxed my hands and looked up. "Chloe, play the rest of the clip." Chloe froze. "What clip?" "The part before I got angry with the employee. The part where he admits to changing the price appendix without authorization, nearly sabotaging the bid proposal. Do you have that?" Chloe was silent. David immediately connected his laptop. The full, unedited video played. The whole room saw the employee admit to his mistake, followed by my reaction. Then the final part, where I calmly instructed him to fix the file according to procedure, without any personal insults. I looked at Chloe. Half-truths can be more toxic than a lie. Her face went pale. "Outside," Eleanor shrieked. "Don't you dare shame my family in front of outsiders. Marital problems should be discussed at home." I stood up and walked toward the glass wall, my voice just loud enough for her to hear. "Mother, don't force your daughter-in-law to be silent just because your family is afraid of losing face." Julian slammed his hand on the table. "Alara," I turned back to him. "You say I'm not of sound mind, so let's have the whole room here who was a little too clear-headed last night." It was then that Silas finally stood up. He placed his pen on the table and spoke slowly. This meeting needs to be paused. According to the chairman's protection clause established by Arthur Vance before his passing, when there are signs that the chief executive's shareholding or voting rights are under threat, we must open the special records safe. The room buzzed with chatter. Julian whipped his head toward Silas. What safe? I was his son-in-law, and I never heard of it. Silas looked at Julian, his eyes as cold as a deep well, because that safe wasn't for his son-in-law. It was to protect his daughter. I sat in silence, my heart pounding. For all these years, I thought my father had given me everything through his will, his shares, and his advice. I never imagined he had left one final door, one that would only open when the person beside me had turned into a knife. Ethan spoke clearly for the record. I request it be noted that the meeting is temporarily paused to open the special records safe with all relevant parties as witnesses. Julian stared at me. The feigned look of pity was gone from his eyes, replaced only by panic. I stared right back. The secure records room was at the end of the 12th floor corridor, behind 2 frosted glass doors and 1 gray steel door. I had passed it countless times but never imagined that inside, a safe was waiting for the day I was cornered by my husband's family. Silas presented my father's old letter of authorization. Helen, David, and 2 members of the oversight committee were invited as witnesses. Julian followed, his face a cold mask. Leo was fidgety. Chloe clutched her tablet like a life raft. Marcus was silent, but his hands repeatedly clenched and unclenched. Eleanor was barred from entering, as she held no official position. She protested, "I'm his mother!" "This is a family matter. Why can't I go in?" I turned to look at her. "This is the Lockwood Corporate Archive, not your kitchen." Her face darkened. The safe was built into a recessed wall cabinet. It had 3 electronic locks and a seal of red wax. Silas placed his hand on the wax seal for a long moment. "Arthur told me that if the day came when I had to open this, it would mean you were in a great deal of pain." I couldn't speak, a lump forming in my throat. Ethan read the official unsealing protocol aloud. It required Silas's signature, confirmation from the designated lawyer, and a backup code that I held in my inheritance envelope. My father had given it to me with the will. I had kept it for years, thinking it was just a security measure, never imagining it was the final key. I opened my wallet and took out the small, creased piece of paper. My hand trembled as I entered the numbers. A beep sounded, and the safe door clicked open. Suddenly, I felt like a child standing before my father's study. He used to sit there, looking over blueprints, and reminding me, a leader must have compassion. But in being compassionate, never forget to protect yourself. Inside the safe, there was no gold, no property deeds, just an envelope with my name on it and 3 document binders tied with red string. I picked up the letter. My father's handwriting, still strong and steady, with its characteristic rightward slant, addressed me. To my daughter, Alara Vance. If you are reading this in a time of peace, have a laugh at your old man and put it away. But if you are reading this because your authority is under threat, it means my judgment was not wrong. I never forbade you to love Julian, nor did I want you to live your life suspicious of the person beside you. But Alara, loving your husband is not wrong. Trusting your husband is not wrong, and being a wife is not wrong. What is wrong is wanting to be a good wife so badly that you forget you are the guardian of a legacy. Lockwood is not just an asset. It is the livelihood of our employees, the sweat of those who followed me since we were poor. Do not let anyone use the word family to make you sign what you do not want to sign, to concede what you are not permitted to concede. If a day comes when you are forced to choose between your in-law's face and your own backbone, choose the backbone. A lost reputation can be restored. A broken backbone will leave you crawling for the rest of your life. I read to the end, tears falling onto the page. The room was utterly silent. Even those who had been whispering in the meeting now bowed their heads. From behind me, Julian let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Your father wrote beautifully. It turns out he saw me as an outsider from the very beginning. Before I could answer, Ethan opened the first binder. It was an independent audit report, prepared shortly before my father passed away. It listed supply companies that had engaged in irregular transactions with Lockwood. Some names I knew, others were unfamiliar, but their registered agents had circular connections to the Croft family. Helen quickly flipped to a marked section. Apex Construction Supply provided steel at an unusually high price. Some shipments were flagged for re-inspection. Keystone Cement, split invoices. Vanguard Equipment Rental. Payments funneled through an intermediary account. Leo's face went white. Helen, don't frame me. The contracts went through an approval process. I couldn't have done it alone. Helen looked him straight in the eye. You weren't alone, but you were the one who opened the door. Ethan opened the second binder. Inside were surveillance photos and notes. One photo made Marcus freeze. In it, he was sitting at a coffee shop with a representative from a security tech firm. Shortly after, access rights to the executive floor cameras were altered. David read from the notes. Following this meeting, a secondary admin account was created without a formal approval record. The days the cameras were under maintenance coincide with visits from Silas and Helen. Marcus gritted his teeth. A photo at a coffee shop proves nothing. I'm head of security. Meeting with vendors is normal. Silas looked at him. Normal meetings have records. Secretive ones do not. The third binder was on communications. It contained printouts of emails from Chloe's account, scheduling articles that promoted Julian's image as the de facto leader. There was even a publication schedule for the article, Chairwoman Alara Vance on temporary health leave, timed for right after the celebration dinner. Chloe stammered, I was just preparing contingency plans. Communications has to be one step ahead. I looked at her. One step ahead? Or digging a grave ahead of time? Chloe looked down. Then, Silas took out a small USB drive. He plugged it into Ethan's laptop. A few seconds of static, then Eleanor's voice filled the room, not with moralizing platitudes, but sharp and cold. You have to take control of Lockwood. Don't spend your whole life with the reputation of living off your wife's family. Once something belongs to the family, it must become the family's. Alara is soft-hearted. Just sweet-talk her and tighten your grip slowly. All the blood seemed to drain from my body. Outside the door, Eleanor, hearing her own voice, pounded on the glass. That was a private conversation between a mother and son. Who gave you the right to record us? I walked toward the glass door. For the first time, I saw my mother-in-law without her air of superiority. She was afraid not of doing wrong, but of being heard. Julian slammed his hand on the table. Enough. Your father looked down on me from the start. Your whole family never saw me as a man. I tried for so many years, and in the end, I'm still just the husband living off his wife. I turned back to look at him, the man I had leaned on the day my father died, now trembling with wounded pride. My father didn't look down on you, I said slowly. He just saw what I was trying so hard not to see. Julian stared at me, his eyes red. So you also think I'm a freeloader? I used to think you were my husband, but you thought I was a bridge to be crossed and then kicked into the river. The room fell silent. My father's letter was still in my hand. I folded it and placed it on top of the files. At that moment, I understood that this safe hadn't just saved my position as chairwoman, it had saved the last shred of my sanity. I folded my father's letter and placed it beside the 3 binders. The paper was old, the ink no longer fresh, but every word made my back straighten, as if my father's hand were on my shoulder. No one in the archive room spoke loudly anymore. Even Julian, who had just slammed the table in a fit of ego, stood frozen. Perhaps only then did he understand that the game he thought was being played within the family had been seen by someone else all along. Ethan closed the audit file. I recommend all parties return to the conference room. From this point forward, all decisions regarding executive authority must be conducted strictly according to company bylaws. Julian's voice was a low growl. Don't talk as if I'm a criminal. I am still the chief operating officer of this project. I turned to him. Only until this sentence is finished. We returned to the conference room. Moments ago, many had looked at me as if I were an overreacting wife. Now, their gazes avoided Julian, Leo, and Chloe. Some truths don't need to be shouted. Simply placing them on the table is enough to make people look down. Eleanor was still kept outside the glass wall, pounding on it. Alara, what are you planning to do to your husband? Don't you forget you are a daughter-in-law of the Croft family? I looked at her through the glass. I haven't forgotten. It's because I was a daughter-in-law of the Croft family for so long that today, I finally remembered I am also the daughter of Arthur Vance. I sat down in the chairman's seat. This time, no one else dared to sit there. The meeting self-convened by Mr. Julian Croft this morning is not a valid board meeting. It lacked proper notice, an approved agenda, and the confirmation of the chair of the board, which is me. Therefore, any proposals aimed at altering executive authority during this meeting are void. A shareholder nodded. Someone else began taking notes. Ethan opened the company bylaws. Pursuant to the Articles of Lockwood Development, when an individual in an executive position shows a conflict of interest, causes financial harm, or threatens shareholder rights, the chair of the board has the authority to request a temporary suspension of their duties related to the matter to facilitate an audit and preserve corporate assets. This is not a criminal verdict, but a risk mitigation measure. I understood why Ethan was so precise. We had to be firm, but not reckless. I took my father's fountain pen from my bag. I signed the resolution temporarily suspending all of Mr. Julian Croft's executive authority over the $750 million waterfront project. It also temporarily revoked his right to approve contracts, access project files, and represent the company with partners until the conclusion of an independent audit. The nib touched the paper. The sound of the signature was soft, but in the quiet room, it was as clear as a deadbolt locking. Julian shot to his feet. "Alara, you can't do this to me." I looked up. "You can prepare a drugged drink, a side door, and a power of attorney for me, but I can't sign a resolution that follows the company's own rules?" Julian was speechless. I signed the second document. Mr. Leo Croft is temporarily suspended from all duties in materials procurement. His contract files, payment authorizations, work email, and company-issued devices are to be sealed. All pending transactions will be taken over by the Oversight Committee. Leo slammed his hand on the table. "Are you trying to pin everything on me? I followed procedure. Has anyone caught me taking a single dollar?" Helen looked at him. "Invoices speak. Bank records speak. Just let them have their say." Leo fell silent. I signed the third document. Miss Chloe Croft is temporarily suspended from managing internal communications. Her tablet, posting accounts, access to the image library, and all related media data are to be confiscated. Chloe clutched her tablet. "Alara, you're killing my career. I was just following Julian's communication directives." I looked at her. A communications career doesn't die because you lose a device. It dies when you use half-truths to bury someone else's reputation. Chloe's eyes reddened, but she had to put the tablet down. Leah accepted the device and drew up a receipt on the spot. The final document lay before me. Mr. Marcus Thorne's access cards, security system privileges, camera administration account, and secondary server access are hereby revoked. The handover will be conducted today, witnessed by an independent technical unit. Marcus gave a bitter smile. "You think taking my key card will give you control of the system?" David answered. "No. But taking the card is the first step. The next is to trace the logs. Rest assured, systems have a better memory than people." Marcus's face darkened. Outside, Eleanor shrieked. "My God, she's destroying her husband, her brothers, in-law, her entire family-in-law. I raised a highly educated daughter-in-law just to have her turn around and bite us." I stood up, opened the conference room door, and stepped in front of her. The relatives standing behind her avoided my eyes. I spoke slowly, loud enough for all to hear. "Mother, you once taught me that a daughter-in-law must protect her home. Today, I am protecting the exact home my father left me. I'm just no longer protecting the people who want to steal it." Eleanor's lips trembled. "Is that how you speak to your mother-in-law?" "This is the last time I will call you mother in matters of the company. From now on, what is family business will be handled in family court. What is company business will be handled according to bylaws and the law." Julian came out and stood behind me, his voice lowered. "Alara, let me speak to you alone for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes." I turned around. For a fleeting moment, I still saw the man who had driven me home through rainstorms. But the moment passed. Before me was the man who had arranged for me to be unconscious before the paperwork was done. From now on, I will not speak to you privately about anything related to Lockwood. If you want to talk, it will be with lawyers, with a record, and with witnesses. Are you really that heartless? I looked at him calmly. Last night, you weren't planning to harm me privately, were you? No one laughed, but the question made Julian's face go white. The Oversight Committee began drawing up handover reports right there in the conference room. Devices were surrendered, accounts were locked, and files were sealed. Ethan drafted a notice to shareholders, partners, banks, and department heads. Lockwood would continue to operate as usual. The waterfront project would proceed, but all authority related to Julian, Leo, Chloe, and Marcus was temporarily revoked pending investigation. I signed the final notice. I hadn't cried once all morning. When I walked out of the conference room, sunlight was streaming through the large windows. I looked back at the chairman's chair. For the first time in months, it no longer felt cold. Not because power had warmed it, but because I was finally sitting in it with my own backbone. After the suspension notices were sent, I didn't allow myself to sit in the chairman's office for long. To prove a trap isn't a misunderstanding. You have to return to where it was set. Ethan placed a file on the table. Now, we need to deal with the restaurant. The company evidence proves the conspiracy to seize control. The drugged drink, the side door, The waiting car that evidence is at the scene. I nodded. Let's go now. Silas looked at me. You've been up all night. I haven't fallen yet. When I do, you can make me rest. He sighed but didn't object. He probably understood that when a fire is burning inside you, you use it to light the way, not let it consume you. We returned to the restaurant by the river in the early afternoon. It was the same polished stone lobby, the same staff bowing gracefully. But in my eyes, the place was no longer luxurious. It was a stage where, just last night, they had planned to drop the curtain behind my back. The restaurant manager, a man named Howard, came out to meet us. He was excessively polite, a smile on his face but a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Miss Vance, we sincerely apologize for the service incident last night. If your gown was damaged, the restaurant will cover all costs. I looked him straight in the eye. The gown is worth nothing compared to a person's life. I need the reservation details, the staff roster for that shift, camera footage from the hallway and bar area, and your internal incident report from last night. Howard's smile froze. Ma'am, that data is subject to our guest privacy policy. Ethan placed a formal request on the table. This is an official request related to a suspected incident where a guest's drink was tampered with, and arrangements were made to remove her through a side door in an incapacitated state. If the restaurant does not cooperate, we will proceed through the authorities. Howard paused for a few seconds, then nodded. Let me get our security department. While we waited, Nathan emerged from the staff area. He was in uniform, but looked more tired than the night before. Upon seeing me, he bowed his head low. Miss Vance. I stood up. Did they give you a hard time? Nathan glanced at the manager and spoke softly. They questioned why I took a guest to the staff break room on my own initiative. I said I was following guest safety protocols. I spoke loud enough for Howard to hear. You did the right thing. Trying to force a dizzy guest out a side door is what's wrong. Nathan was invited into a private office. Ethan spoke first. Nathan, just state exactly what you saw and heard. Nothing more, nothing less. Miss Vance is here not to buy your testimony, but to protect you from being pressured into silence. Nathan nodded. He recounted hearing Julian and Marcus in the VIP corridor the previous afternoon. He confirmed my drink was prepared separately and not placed on the main tray. He also remembered Marcus standing near the shift manager before the party, talking for a long time while gesturing toward the side door. Ethan asked, Did you hear what they said? Nathan replied, I heard the manager relay instructions to us. If Mr. Croft's wife felt unwell, we were to notify the family, not call an ambulance on our own, to avoid disturbing the VIP guests. Howard interjected. That could have just been a standard precaution. High-profile guests often prefer privacy. I turned to him. An innocent person would call for an ambulance. Only someone with a motive would be afraid of a doctor showing up. Howard was speechless. The security team brought up the hallway camera footage. On the screen, I saw myself from last night, my gown wet, following Nathan. A few minutes later, Marcus appeared at the side door. He wasn't eating or talking. He just stood there, looking out at the back parking lot. The camera covering the kitchen exit showed a black 7-seater SUV, parked and idling. The driver got out, smoked a cigarette, and checked his phone repeatedly. This was precisely the time I was supposed to be unwell and taken home by family. Silas pointed at the screen. Who booked that car? Restaurant security checked the logbook. The car wasn't registered with us, but we have the license plate number. Ethan immediately requested they extract it. Next was the bar's data. A young bartender was called in. He was pale the moment he saw us. Last night, who ordered the separate carrot orange juice for Miss Vance? He stammered. The shift manager told me to make a separate glass with light ice and leave it on the service ledge. Why not with the other drinks? I don't know, sir. I just followed orders. Was anyone standing nearby while you made it? He glanced at Howard. Mr. Thorne was standing outside the bar. He didn't come in, but he watched for a while. I asked, That drink? The one I didn't finish, where is it now? The small room went silent. A security staffer spoke up. It was collected with the dirty dishes, but Nathan had told Sarah to set that specific tray aside in a storage room. I turned to Nathan. He looked embarrassed. I was afraid something was wrong, so I asked her not to wash it just yet. Once again, that young waiter had saved me. Sarah was called in. She confirmed she had kept the tray with the unfinished juice, the spilled water glass, and the cloth used on my gown in a separate bag. Ethan requested it be sealed and handed over for analysis, with a formal chain of custody record. I didn't speculate on what might be in the glass. One premature accusation could break the chain of evidence. It was better to let the drink, the cameras, the testimonies, and the car tell the story. By now, Howard couldn't even force a smile. Miss Vance, the restaurant sincerely hopes this matter can be handled discreetly. Our reputation? I looked at him. Your reputation is valuable, but my reputation and my safety are not? He bowed his head. Nathan said quietly, Ma'am, I'm sorry for spilling water on your dress. I couldn't think of another way. I looked at him and noticed a small bruise on his wrist. You have nothing to be sorry for. If not for that glass of water, they might have been guiding my hand to sign a power of attorney today. Nathan looked down, his eyes red. I didn't save you to get ahead in life. I was just afraid my mother would be indebted to someone who was being harmed while I stood by and did nothing. I placed my hand on the stack of signed statements, my voice slow. I know. And that's why I won't let you bear this alone. Ethan immediately added a clause to our request, demanding the restaurant not pressure, unfavorably transfer, or terminate the employment of Nathan or Sarah during the investigation. All communications with these witnesses had to be documented. Before leaving, I stood at the end of the hallway where, the night before, Nathan had whispered for me not to go back. The VIP room door was closed. There was no more laughter, no more scent of lobster thermidor. I walked out the main entrance. This time, no one was leading me out the back. Leaving the restaurant, I thought I would have a quiet afternoon to review the statements with Ethan. But as our car pulled up to my father's old house, on a street lined with crepe myrtle trees, Leah called, her voice frantic. Alara, there's a huge crowd at the gate. They say they're Julian's relatives. Eleanor is here too. I closed my eyes for a second. They couldn't get me with a drugged drink. They couldn't force me with a meeting. So they resorted to the most familiar tactic in any family dispute, using a mob to overwhelm one woman. Silas, sitting beside me, sighed. Do you want to use the back entrance? I looked through the window. The small lane in front of my father's house was packed with people. Eleanor stood right at the gate, holding my wedding photo. A circle of aunts and uncles from the Croft family stood around her, some with arms crossed, others pointing and talking. A few curious neighbors peeked out from their doors. I shook my head. No, Silas. This is my father's house. I'm not using the back door. The car stopped. The moment they saw me get out, Eleanor burst into loud, theatrical sobs, as if she had rehearsed it in front of a mirror. Oh, heavens! Look, everyone! My daughter-in-law has become so mighty. Now that she has money and power, she drags her husband's name through the mud and lets the world trample on his family. A gray-haired uncle pointed at me. Alara, you can't do this. Every marriage has its bumps in the road. Why run to lawyers in boardrooms over a small dispute? Family matters should be settled behind closed doors. I stood silently and let them talk. Another aunt chimed in. Such a large enterprise. What's wrong with letting your husband manage it? A woman who takes on too much will only burn herself out. If you just yielded a little, your home would be peaceful. I looked at the wedding photo in Eleanor's hands. In the picture, I was wearing a red dress, and Julian stood beside me, smiling gently. On that day, Eleanor had held my hand and said, Come be my daughter. I will love you like my own. Now, that same mother-in-law was holding our wedding picture like a death notice. Eleanor wiped her tears with a handkerchief. You're highly educated, yet you don't understand how to be a proper wife. If your husband has faults, you should advise him. Instead, you suspend him, and you drag his brother and sister through the mud at the company. Do you want my whole family to die of shame? I remained silent, not out of fear, but because some people, the more you argue with them, the more they believe they are the judge. Julian stood behind her, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red from lack of sleep. He looked at me, his voice hoarse. Alara, I know you're angry, but do you have to take it this far? I just wanted to prove I was worthy. I didn't want to spend my whole life being told I was living off my wife. I looked at him for a long time. In the past, just hearing him say that would have softened my heart. A woman who loves her husband is often most afraid of wounding his pride. But pride, if not properly placed, is just greed wearing the cloak of victimhood. I asked, if you just wanted to prove you were worthy, why did you prepare a separate drink for me? The crowd murmured. Eleanor immediately snapped. There she goes, falsely accusing her husband again. Do you have proof to be saying that in the middle of the street? Ethan stepped forward. Ma'am, all related matters have been documented with the restaurant. We are not here to argue legal points at your gate. We ask that you disperse and not cause a public disturbance. An uncle from the Croft family waved his hand dismissively. Lawyers will always defend their clients. I'm just talking about morality. No matter what, Julian is her husband. After years of marriage, you have to show some respect. I turned to him. I agree, Uncle. A husband and wife should respect each other, but respect doesn't mean escorting your wife out a side door while she's unconscious. Respect doesn't mean drafting a power of attorney to take her voting rights. And respect certainly doesn't mean bringing your relatives to your father-in-law's gate to intimidate his daughter. No one answered immediately. Eleanor gritted her teeth. You make it sound so dramatic, but don't you forget, you are a daughter-in-law of the Croft family. If you make your husband lose face, you won't look so good either. I stepped closer to her. For the first time in my life, I looked my mother-in-law straight in the eye without flinching. Mother, you once taught me that a daughter-in-law must protect her home. Today, I am protecting the exact home my father left me. Please don't use the duties of a wife to cover up greed. Eleanor was stunned. I continued, my voice not loud but clear. I will call you mother, one last time. You brought this wedding photo here to remind me of my marital duties. So let me remind you. Marital duties are not a cloth to cover a trap. This picture represents a happy day in my life. Don't turn it into a prop to silence me. Some of the relatives who had been vocal just moments ago now took a step back. Julian stepped forward. Alara, I'm begging you. Let's go inside and talk. Don't let the neighbors see this. I looked at him. You're afraid of the neighbors seeing, but last night you weren't afraid of the whole restaurant seeing me being taken away? Julian's face went pale. He lowered his voice. I admit I was wrong to be so impulsive, but I never wanted to harm you. I just wanted the power to make decisions, to be seen as a real man. I gave a sad smile. A real man doesn't need his wife to be unconscious to be seen. If you want to stand in front, build your own path. Don't push your wife off a cliff to get there. That made Eleanor erupt. You're so clever, aren't you? If you're so clever, then get a divorce. Let's see who will marry a woman as hard as stone, who doesn't know how to yield to her husband. I nodded. Yes, I will file for divorce. The crowd fell silent. Perhaps they thought I would be afraid of those two words, but after a night of being plotted against by my husband, divorce was no longer about failure. It was an escape hatch. I turned to my lawyer. Ethan, from now on, all matters regarding my marriage to Julian will go through you. Company matters will continue according to the established process. If anyone continues to gather here and apply pressure, please document it for me. Ethan nodded. I've been recording since we arrived. Eleanor's face turned red. You're recording your mother-in-law? I replied. I learned from my in-laws. The only difference is, I record to protect myself, not to take what belongs to someone else. Silas opened the gate, and I stepped into my father's yard. The old oak tree by the porch stood silently, its leaves rustling in the wind. Behind me, I could still hear Eleanor crying, relatives trying to calm her, and Julian calling my name one last time. But I didn't turn back. Some gates, when you walk through them, it isn't about leaving home. It's about returning to where you truly belong. The next morning, I signed the divorce petition in Ethan's office. The document was only a few pages, the language dry, but each line felt like it was cutting through more than a decade of marriage. Some things, when they are in your heart, are as heavy as mountains, but once put on paper, they become surprisingly light. Ethan read each request aloud. You confirm that your shares in Lockwood Development are separate property, inherited from Arthur Vance. I confirm. You request that these shares not be included in the division of marital assets. Correct. You request that any damages related to Lockwood Development be handled separately from the divorce, based on the audit and relevant authorities. Correct. I answered each question, my voice so calm it surprised even me. It turns out that when a person's heart is broken so thoroughly once, it automatically seals itself off so you can keep living. That afternoon, Julian texted, asking to meet privately. I didn't reply. A short while later, he called Ethan. A meeting was finally arranged in a small conference room at the law firm, with a recorder running and minutes being taken. Julian came alone. No Eleanor behind him, no Leo chiming in, no Chloe with her camera, no Marcus guarding the door. Just one man in a white shirt, stubble on his chin, dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. I sat across from him. Between us was a long wooden table, a pitcher of water, and 2 glass tumblers that no one had touched. I looked at the 2 glasses and found myself smiling faintly. After that night, I would probably never be able to look at a glass of water from Julian's hand without shuddering for the rest of my life. Ethan sat beside me. Julian looked at him. I'd like to speak with my wife for a few minutes. Ethan replied, Please proceed. I am only here to document, not to intervene, unless the conversation involves pressure or threats. Julian turned to me, his voice hoarse. Alara, I'm sorry. I remained silent. He lowered his head, his hands clasped together. I know things went too far. But you have to understand, all these years living with you, I was always seen as the husband riding his wife's coattails. Everywhere we went, people would say, "That's the husband of the Lockwood chairwoman." No one ever asked who I was or what I could do. I was exhausted. I looked at the man before me. In the past, when he complained of pressure, I felt sorry for him. I had brought him into the company, given him responsibilities, introduced him to partners, and let him stand beside me at signings. I thought I was lifting my husband up. I never imagined he saw my outstretched hand as a ladder to climb over my head. I asked, "If it was just about your pride, why did you have a separate drink prepared for me? Why was there a side door? Why did you tell the restaurant not to call an ambulance? Why did you draft the power of attorney, the health records, the media releases saying I wasn't of sound mind?" He swallowed hard. "I didn't intend to harm you. I just wanted you to take a break for a while. You were getting more and more stressed, taking on everything. I'm your husband. I have the right to share your burden." I let out a very soft laugh. Sharing a burden requires the wife to be unconscious before you're done? Julian squeezed his eyes shut, as if I had slapped him. A moment later, he looked up. "You never gave me the feeling of being the head of the family. The house is your house. The company is your father's. The old guard listens to you, the shareholders listen to you. Everything I did felt like I was borrowing someone else's stage to stand on. Do you understand that feeling?" I looked at him, my heart growing colder. "You wanted to be the head of the family by taking your wife's company. You wanted to be acknowledged. Acknowledgement doesn't come from a power of attorney signed while your wife is in a stupor." Julian clenched his fists, his face flushing, then turning pale. "Every word you say is like a judge's sentence. Did you ever think I was pushed into a corner? I didn't push you toward that glass of water." The room was silent. Ethan continued writing, his pen moving steadily across the paper. The sound of it was colder than any argument. Julian lowered his voice. "Alara, I'm begging you. We can get divorced. Fine. I'll leave Lockwood. I won't ask for any of your shares. But please, drop the charges. Don't drag my mother, Leo, Chloe, and Marcus into this. My mother is old. She can't handle it." I looked at him for a long time. This was what he really wanted. Not an apology for frightening me, not remorse for turning his wife into prey. He wanted me to open an escape route for his family, to preserve their tattered reputation. "You're asking me to protect your mother's reputation?" Julian nodded eagerly. "Yes. If my mother was wrong, it was because she loves her children. She values her reputation. If you make a big deal out of this, she won't be able to bear the gossip." I asked, "And what about my honor?" He fell silent. "When your mother brought her relatives to my father's gate and called me a treacherous daughter-in-law, did she think I could bear the gossip? When Chloe drafted articles turning me into a madwoman, did your family think about my honor? When Leo texted me to know what's good for me, did you think of me as your wife?" Julian looked down. Ethan finally spoke up. "Withdrawing a report cannot be a condition of sentiment. If Mr. Croft and the other parties wish to remedy the situation, they must cooperate by providing documents, compensating for damages if found liable, and ceasing all acts of pressure against Miss Vance and any witnesses." Julian turned to Ethan, annoyed. "This is between my wife and me." Ethan was calm. When a matter between a husband and wife involves a suspicious drink, a side door, a waiting car, power of attorney documents, and corporate damages, it is no longer a matter to be settled behind the closed doors of a bedroom. I almost laughed. Ethan spoke little, but every sentence landed like a rubber stamp. Julian looked at me, his eyes softening. "Alara, we loved each other once. I was there for you when your father died. You can't just erase everything because of one mistake." Hearing that, my heart ached. It was true. He was there for me when my father died. He had held me when I cried myself sick. He had made me soup, had waited for me outside meeting rooms. Not all of it was fake. It was precisely because some of it felt real that the betrayal hurt so much. But the person who once shielded you from the rain does not get the right to push you down a well and tell you to be grateful for the old umbrella. I said, "In over a decade of marriage, I could have forgiven the cold dinners, the harsh words from your mother, the times you stayed silent when I was disrespected. But I cannot forgive a plan to render me unconscious so you could take my place." Julian gritted his teeth. "You've changed. You're not the woman I married." I nodded. "That's right. That woman almost drank the juice you gave her. Julian's eyes reddened. He shot to his feet, the chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. You'll regret this. Ethan looked up immediately. I suggest you retract that last statement, Mr. Croft, unless you want it documented as a threat. Julian stood frozen for a few seconds, then gave a bitter laugh, so distorted it was pathetic. I'm not threatening her. I'm just saying a woman who is too hard will end up alone. I looked at him, calmer than I thought possible. Loneliness is more breathable than lying next to someone waiting for you to pass out. Julian said nothing more. He signed the meeting minutes, his handwriting shaky, and walked out. The door clicked shut. I sat there, staring at the 2 glasses of water on the table. A drop of condensation ran down the side and fell onto the wood. I didn't cry. Some farewells don't require screaming or tears. All that's needed is the quiet knowledge that from now on, even if the road is lonelier, it is the road to survival. 3 days after the meeting with Julian, I went to the waterfront construction site while the sky was still misty. The moment the car stopped, the smell of red dust, steel, and damp concrete filled the air. It was different from the perfume of the VIP room, different from the cold scent of legal papers. Here, everything was rougher, louder, but more real. I put on a white hard hat, zipped up a reflective vest, and stepped out. A few workers eating sandwiches and burgers from a food truck paused when they saw me. An older man looked at me for a long time, then his face lit up. Are you Miss Vance? Arthur's girl? I turned, yes, I'm Alara. He smiled, deep wrinkles forming at the corners of his eyes. I'm Al. I worked with your dad on the bridge upstate. You were just a little thing back then. He'd bring you to the site, and you'd sit and eat lunch with us. Mister. Vance always said, if my daughter takes over one day, don't be afraid of getting your hands dirty. My father was gone, but in the places he had been, people still remembered him through shared meals and handshakes covered in cement dust. The site engineer, Mr. Mendez, ran out from the administrative trailer to greet me. He was in his 40s, his skin tanned, his gaze direct. He had tried to meet with me several times before to report issues with materials, but my schedule was always moved. Chairwoman, you're here early. I looked at him. I'm late. It's time to make up for it. Mr. Mendez led me into the trailer and spread the master plan across a table. The project is still moving, but there are 3 danger points. First, the D17 steel rebar shipment is not as uniform as promised. Second, the cement for the secondary foundation has had its supplier label swapped. Third, the crane equipment, leased at a high price on paper, is underperforming. I opened each file. In the office, these numbers were just reports. At the construction site, they were the foundations of buildings, the spans of bridges, the lives of the people working below. Did Leo know about this? Mr. Mendez gave a bitter smile. I sent 3 reports. The procurement department said it was handled. Then I was told not to go over their heads and disrupt the general progress. I turned to Ethan, who was there to document everything. Minute this immediately. Temporarily halt acceptance of all questionable material lots. Bring in an independent inspection unit today. A young supervisor looked worried. If we stop, we'll fall behind schedule. Our partners are watching very closely after the internal issues. I looked outside, where a crane was moving slowly against the gray sky. A few days' delay can be fixed. A bad foundation, faulty steel if trust collapses later. No one can sign off on a second chance at life for us. Mr. Mendez nodded firmly. That sounds just like something Arthur would say. I smiled faintly. If my father heard that, he'd probably tell me not to use his name to lecture people. The tension in the trailer eased. Someone laughed. It was a small laugh, but after so many suffocating days, it felt like a splash of water washing away the dust. Around noon, representatives from our partners and a few shareholders arrived at the site. A $750 million project can't rest on the foundation of a family tearing itself apart. Business people fear uncertainty more than they fear storms. They need to know who is at the helm. Mr. Chen, the partner representative, shook my hand with some reservation. Chairwoman Vance, we need a clear commitment. After the recent turmoil, does Lockwood still have the capacity to manage this project? I laid out a 3-layer control plan on the table, replacing the materials procurement lead, re-auditing all contracts, adding an independent monitoring unit, and revoking single-person approval authority. Lockwood isn't hiding its internal turmoil, but we are addressing it with process, not promises. Any questionable materials will be halted, any flawed records will be opened, and anyone found to have caused potential damages will be removed from the project. A shareholder who had been close to Julian asked, but Mr. Croft was always in charge of site relations. With him suspended, are you sure you grasp all the details? I opened the progress chart and pointed to each milestone. This is the Eastern Foundation. We're waiting 4 days for soil testing results. This is the temporary drainage line, held up by land acquisition negotiations with 2 final households. This is the test pile section. The load-bearing report is complete but hasn't been forwarded to the Oversight Committee. Julian may have visited the site often, but that doesn't mean only he knows how it breathes. The shareholder fell silent. From outside the trailer, Al, the old worker, called in. Miss Vance followed her dad out here since she was a kid. She'd fall in a pile of sand and not even cry. Don't you gentlemen think that just because a woman wears heels, she doesn't know what mud feels like? The whole trailer broke into laughter. I laughed too, for the first time in days, a genuine laugh. At lunchtime, they invited me to a restaurant near the site. I shook my head and took a lunchbox with the crew. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a simple salad. The rice was a bit dry, the fish a bit salty, but it tasted better than the lobster dinner. Mr. Mendez sat across from me and hesitated. Chairwoman, honestly, the crew down here thought you'd been blinded. No matter what we reported, it never seemed to reach you. A lot of people were discouraged. I put down my chopsticks. I was wrong because I trusted the wrong person, and because I was too far from the site. From now on, technical reports will follow 2 parallel paths, one through the project team, and one directly to the Oversight Committee. No one will block them midway again. A young engineer asked, "What about the media? They're saying the company is in chaos. How will you respond?" I looked at Leah, who had temporarily taken over communications after Chloe was suspended. No need for spin. Just post the official notice. The project continues. Questionable materials are under review, and control processes are being strengthened. If the truth is clean enough, it doesn't need a lot of makeup. That afternoon, I walked the site for nearly 2 hours. Dust caked the cuffs of my pants, and sweat trickled under my hard hat. I stood before a deep foundation pit and remembered my father's words. A company that builds houses for others must first have a leader who can build a backbone for herself. That evening, my phone buzzed with news that Chloe had posted some veiled comments online, suggesting I was putting on a show at the construction site to win public favor. Leah asked worriedly if we should respond. I sent her a photo of me standing next to the sealed steel shipment, a signed inspection report in the background. Just post this. People who put on a show love the stage. People who do the work let the work speak for itself. That night, the first internal newsletter without Julian's face in the center of the frame was sent out. No praise, no grandstanding, just photos of the site, inspection reports, a recovery plan, and a commitment to the timeline. I looked at the newsletter for a long time. For the first time in months, Lockwood's image was no longer the shadow of one man's ego. It had returned to being a company with workers, with accountability, with the dust of a construction site, and with my father's backbone in every brick. A week after my visit to the site, the first audit report was placed on my desk. The file wasn't thick, but every page was heavy. Some numbers, at first glance, were just price discrepancies. Added together, they became the sweat of workers, the money of shareholders, and the honor of Lockwood. Helen pushed her glasses up. Look at this summary. The steel, cement, and equipment contracts all show signs of price inflation and were split to evade oversight. The preliminary damages are substantial enough to demand an explanation from all parties and to halt payment on any unfinished transactions. Leo's name appeared multiple times in the supplier recommendation section. Some of his signatures were so careless, it was as if the signer had grown accustomed to thinking no one would dare to look. Ethan said, "We use the language shows signs of, not concludes, to avoid usurping the role of the authorities. But internally, the company has the right to demand compensation if we can prove damages and managerial negligence." I nodded. Do it by the book. Don't let anger make us make a mistake. That afternoon, Leo was called in to meet with the Oversight Committee. The moment he walked in, he raised his voice. "I'm telling you now, I didn't take a single dollar. Julian knew about all those contracts. Don't think you can pin it all on me just because I'm the little guy." I looked at my brother-in-law, the one who had said only a man could carry the company. Today, his voice was still loud, but his feet wouldn't stay still. Helen placed the bank records in front of him. "This is the payment to Apex Construction Supply. 3 days later, the money was withdrawn and transferred to your college friend's account. This is the payment to Keystone Cement, whose representative is a cousin of Eleanor's. Explain." Leo was speechless. He turned to Julian, who was sitting on the other side of the room. Say something. You told me to follow this plan, that you'd take responsibility. Julian's face went pale. Leo, watch what you're saying. I only approved what was on paper. You were the one in charge of procurement. I watched the two brothers shove responsibility back and forth like a basket of hot coals. When they thought they were winning, they called each other blood. Now that they were being asked where the money went, that blood was suddenly as thin as rice paper in water. By the end of the session, Leo had to sign a formal statement, was required to cooperate with the full audit, make preliminary restitution for his managerial role, and was now a person of interest to the authorities regarding the suspicious transactions. He signed with a trembling hand. Before leaving, he turned back. You're truly ruthless. After all the years I called you sister-in-law. I replied, calling me sister-in-law is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. What isn't yours will burn your hands if you hold it. Marcus was dealt with next. The independent tech unit traced the secondary admin account, which had repeatedly altered camera angles, deleted access logs, and disabled alerts at the executive floor's side door. Some recovered data showed logins from outside office hours, on the exact days Helen, David, and Silas had come to the company but failed to see me. When confronted, Marcus remained stone-faced. I was following security protocols. A large company needs a flexible system. David gave a dry laugh. Flexible is different from clandestine. Security is meant to protect the chairwoman, not to blind her. Marcus didn't argue further. His contract was terminated, his equipment confiscated, and his case was forwarded to the authorities for his role in data tampering and obstructing internal oversight. Then it was Chloe's turn. She started crying the moment she entered the room. The confident young woman who had directed the party with her phone was gone. Chloe placed her tablet on the table, her eyes red and swollen. Alara, I was just doing communications as Julian directed. I didn't know about the drink or the side door. Please don't kill my career. I opened the draft articles, the cropped photos, the edited clips, the pre-planned posting schedule. You may not have known about the drink, but you knew exactly how you were burying my reputation with half-truths. Chloe burst into tears. I just wanted Julian to be recognized. Our family was always being told we were living off you. I looked at her. So you decided to turn me into a madwoman to make your family feel less ashamed? Chloe bowed her head. After the meeting, her contract was terminated. Her access to all media platforms was revoked, and she had to sign a commitment to remove and not disseminate any defamatory content. The person who once boasted of being the sister of Lockwood's COO now found herself being asked about professional ethics at every job interview. And Julian, his price wasn't paid in a single lightning strike. It came in layers. He was removed from all positions at Lockwood, lost all access to the project, and was required to account for the power of attorney, the restaurant incident, the media campaign, and the materials contracts. The people who had once raised a glass to him as the man at the helm now quietly avoided him. Eleanor couldn't accept it. She ran everywhere, asking relatives to speak on her behalf, begging acquaintances to get her a meeting with me. When all else failed, she put the townhouse she had once bragged her son had bought her on the market. After selling the house, she used part of the money to cover Leo's initial restitution payments. On the day of the divorce mediation, Eleanor still came. This time, she didn't bring any relatives, nor did she have the wedding photo. She sat on a bench in the waiting area, clutching an old handbag, her face gaunt. When she saw me, her lips moved. Alara, can you give him a way out? I looked at her, the woman who had once stood in a VIP room and declared that only a man could hold the reins. Now, there was no purple velvet, no jade necklace. I didn't feel any cruel satisfaction. I just felt that life truly does have its debts and payments. I gave Julian many ways out, ma'am. He chose the side door. She looked down and said nothing more. In the mediation room, Julian signed the divorce settlement. He acknowledged he had no claim to the separate shares I inherited from my father. All matters of damages to Lockwood would be handled independently, based on the audit and the authorities. His signature was no longer as strong as it had been when he signed his first contracts beside me. Before leaving, Julian looked at me. In the end, you won. I held the agreement, my voice very soft. No, I just survived. He was silent. I walked out of the mediation building. The afternoon sun fell on the steps. The relatives who had once scolded me for being heartless now sent roundabout apologies. Others said nothing at all. I didn't reply. Some apologies come after the knife has been pulled out, but the wound still has to heal on its own. I didn't laugh, I didn't celebrate, I didn't call anyone to witness my in-laws' downfall. The greatest satisfaction wasn't seeing them fall. It was that I was still standing, that I had kept Lockwood, and that I had protected my father's name from the hands of those who had used the name of family to try to take it all. Sometime later, Lockwood gradually returned to its normal rhythm. The 1-2-story building lit up each morning. The waterfront site was still dusty, still filled with the sound of drills and workers calling out to one another. The $750 million project was no longer running on the boasts of an insecure man, but on progress charts, inspection reports, and multi-layered approval signatures. I invited Helen back as a financial oversight consultant. The day she walked back into the accounting department, the old staff stood up to greet her, some with tears in their eyes. She just smiled. Less crying. Numbers don't straighten themselves out because of tears. The room broke into laughter. She was still the same. Her words could sound like a scolding, but they felt warm. David was invited back to oversee legal compliance. The templates for power of attorney, proxy voting, and temporary project authority were all rewritten with clear, strict protocols. Signatories had to be physically present, with confirmed health status, video recording, and a lawyer or oversight committee member present for major assets. Mr. Mendez continued to manage the site. Questionable materials were inspected. What was wrong was returned, what was missing was replaced, and what showed signs of fraud was sent to the legal department. I used to think being a chairwoman meant sitting up high and looking down. After all that had happened, I understood that a leader who can't hear the dust from the construction site will sooner or later have a screen put up in front of her eyes by someone else. The data security system was handed over to an independent firm. No longer would one person control all the cameras, key cards, access logs, and backup servers. My meeting schedule also changed. Any board member, accountant, lawyer, technician, or even a worker reporting wrongdoing now had a separate, confidential channel, one that didn't pass through the hands of any family member. I had paid a very high price for that lesson. Family can be a support, but in business, process is the guardrail. Guardrails don't make people love each other less. They just stop them from pushing each other off a cliff and calling it an accident. Nathan continued working at the restaurant for a few more months before quitting to focus on his studies. I didn't offer him a job at Lockwood right away because I didn't want anyone to say I had bought his testimony with a position. I only quietly supported his tuition through a scholarship fund, by the book, with a proper application and receipts. The day Nathan graduated, he came to my office in a crisp white shirt, holding a small bouquet of flowers. He was still as shy as he was that night in the restaurant hallway. "Miss Vance, I just wanted to let you know my mom is doing well, and I finished my degree. Thank you." I looked at the young man who had deliberately spilled water on my gown and thought how strange life was. Someone sits at your table and calls you wife, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, but waits for you to fall. Someone else, standing outside the door with a tray, reaches out a hand to pull you back from the edge. I said, "You're thanking the wrong person. The one who saved me that night was you." Nathan waved his hands. "I just did what I was supposed to do." I smiled. A lot of people in this world know what they're supposed to do, Nathan, but very few dare to do it. Later on, when he was ready, I told him, "Lockwood has a compliance department. If you want to give it a try, submit your resume like any other applicant. Whether you get it or not will be based on your ability, not on any debt of gratitude." He nodded firmly. A while later, he applied. No special treatment, no reserved seat. He was hired as a junior compliance associate. On the day he signed his contract, his hand trembled, just as it had when he played the recording for me. I told him, "Nathan, the most valuable quality in a compliance officer isn't a fancy degree. It's the courage to stop something wrong, whether the person doing it is wearing a suit or has a big title." He bowed his head. "I'll remember that." Some answers are short, but they sound more solid than a long-winded promise. That evening, I returned to my father's old house. The great oak tree in the yard stood silently, its leaves rustling in the wind. I walked into his old study, a room I had kept exactly as he left it. I poured 2 glasses of his favorite scotch, placing one on his heavy mahogany desk. Beside it, I laid the clean report from Lockwood and his old, now laminated letter. I stood before the large oil portrait of him hanging above the fireplace and spoke, as if I were a child coming home from school to show off my grades. "Dad," I held on. "It's not as perfect as you would have wanted, but I held on." I remembered that lobster dinner, the yellow lights of the VIP room, the emerald green gown cold and damp with water, the glass of carrot orange juice that never touched my lips, the look in Julian's eyes as he stared at that glass sharp and panicked, then quickly masked with feigned concern. I remembered Eleanor at the head of the table, saying only a man could hold the reins. I remembered Leo mocking women who took on too much. I remembered Chloe panning her camera past my face as if I were a decoration. I remembered Marcus by the side door, as silent as a preset lock. I used to think that dinner was a celebration of victory. It turned out some banquets aren't served to celebrate, but to escort someone out of their own life. The lobster can smell of garlic butter, the wine can fill the glasses, and the toast can be as sweet as honey. But if a person's heart is dark, not even the lights of a five-star restaurant can illuminate it. After the divorce, people asked if I hated Julian. I thought about it for a long time. There was hate, there was pain, and there was regret. But if I kept holding on to hate, I would just be letting him continue to control my life in a different way. I chose to remember just enough not to be a fool again, and to let go of just enough to live in peace. I also no longer hated the idea of being a wife or a daughter-in-law. There's nothing wrong with being a wife, with respecting elders, or with being patient. But to use those duties to force a woman to surrender her parents' legacy, to swallow humiliation and stay silent in the face of wrongdoing, that is no longer a duty. That is a cage.